You try your best to understand an experience, understand the trauma. You read, you write, you think, you feel. You go to workshops, you do 1,001 different things. And instead of them making you less complicated, so you could kind of understand the stuff better, you become more complicated, you become more confused, you become more anxious, and then you become more frustrated. And then you kind of beat yourself up because you used to be simple. All you had was a negative experience. Now you've read all the stuff and you've listened to all the stuff. What was painful but simple now becomes painful and enormously complex. And now not only do you have to plow through the experience, you also have to plow through all the things you have read and have been exposed to. You haven't gotten any clear as to what you need to do about the experience. You go to sleep, you wake up over 10 years, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden, something about you just clicks and you get it. When you understand, it's a very private understanding. I'm not talking about, sharing your experiences articulately with other people. It's just for yourself, you understand. I don't think there is a magic pill to any of this. I don't think anyone knows. When I was doing Persian traditional music, when I was singing, we have to do tahrir. It's kind of like yodeling. And I remember walking in Roseville, and it wasn't developed the way it is now. Only had 30,000 people, not like now. It's 250,000. And I would just go to this wooded areas and I would just scream. From the car wash to Sierra College, I would scream. From Roseville to San Jose, where I would go, practice my singing, I would scream at top of my lung because that's the only way you can kind of open up your vocal cords so that you could sing traditional music. All of a sudden, it just clicked. I was able to do it. It's true that there was, it was founded on a lot of practice, but I kept saying to myself, when is it going to happen? It's just so raw, it's so mechanical. They're not even, they're not harmonious. When I sing and all of a sudden when I begin to yodel, the tone of my voice changes, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to kind of just in harmony follow your singing voice. And then all of a sudden, it just happened. And I remember when I went to my teacher in San Francisco, his name was Golkar, he sold me his santur. He says, you don't need to come here anymore. It's finished, you've done it. And I think it's one of those things, it's like you pray and you knock on the door in hopes that it opens. And I think understanding is very much the same. You read books in hopes of understanding. You listen in hopes of understanding. You talk to people in hopes of understanding. You write in hopes of understanding. But you have these moments of clarity, that despite all of your accomplishments, you understand nothing. And, you fall into despair because it is a sad place to be. It's something I used to tell my students when we used to go on campus that when I, moved to Oakland with all these ridiculous degrees, getting a full-time job in the social sciences, it's very, very, very difficult. And I was single, and I would walk the streets, and I felt as if I'm homeless, despite having a job, despite going to the classroom and knowing and feeling that students really enjoy how ideas are being presented, despite my office being a hub, the center where people would just come and go freely, they would talk about things. And there were moments I would feel very, very uncomfortable, and I wanted to figure out how I could kind of stop feeling that way. Then all of a sudden it clicked. I really enjoyed that particular feeling, and I would try to walk the streets from the beginning of college all the way to the campus. But it would take me about 2-3 hours walking there and 2-3 hours walking back. And it's really just like anything else. It's a waiting game. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't click. I mean, there are lots of people who go to do philosophy because they've read the dialogues of Plato and they assume that they're going to be the next Socrates. And it's just not there. I'm sure there are lots of people who go to workshops to get rid of a trauma or to understand certain things about themselves or their life experiences, but it just doesn't click, and it clicks for other people. But I think if you're on a journey to understand anything, I think if you just keep on the journey, just continue being on it, and hopefully something will happen. It's like when you have dreams. Sometimes, especially if you happen to have these really intense religious emotions inside you. Sometimes you have dreams and they're very, very, very profound. You have no idea what to do with them because you feel as if your skin is going to explode. And then you kind of walk on clouds for a few days because of the dream. And then time goes, time passes and you kind of miss having those feelings. And you say, okay, I want to have another dream just as intense, just as potent, just as meaningful. Because I want to, if I was on cloud 5, I want to be on cloud 9 tomorrow. And you say, okay, Amir, how did you, for example, have that dream some 10 years ago? You say, okay, well, you were sad, and you hadn't eaten, and you had read, this and that books. So what I did was I would fast, and then I would read intensely emotional books, and then I would do some exercises, and then I would stay up really, really late. And then out of exhaustion, I would just pass out. And I would wake up, there would be no dream. Say, God damn it, I did all that stuff for a dream and nothing happened. So, you want to manufacture understanding, pretend that you've understood something, but it doesn't work. And I think whenever, you become frustrated, or any of us, myself included, where you want to understand something, but it's not coming to you, and you're kind of just left confused and you feel abandoned by the entire thing. I think you should always go back to Jesus and the disciples. Jesus really, if this guy ever existed, all he wanted to do is wanted to make his disciples understand. He had such a difficult time, despite the miracles, despite the stories, despite being blunt. They just couldn't get it. It's not that they didn't want to, they just couldn't get it. It was, wrong time, wrong place, wrong people, I don't know. And, if you kind of are reading a book, for example, and you say, okay, I'm going to be the disciple of this book. It's no different than Peter saying, I'm the disciple of Jesus. You have no idea how well you're understanding the things you're reading. I can't speak for you, but I think if I was to kind of say, I understand, and if I was to be tested like Peter, I would probably deny the things I'm reading 3, 4, 5, 50 times. No one knows how this stuff works. Consider for a moment Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. Ouspensky was, he always had this quality of arrogance to him, but he was a writer, he was a journalist, he was a student of the miraculous, as he would want to call himself. And so what happens? He runs into Gurdjieff. In Search of the Miraculous really is very much like Daughter of Fire. It's just, it's way more technical and lacks a good amount of emotions that Irina expressed in Daughter of Fire. So what happened to Ouspensky, despite all the things that were given to him by Gurdjieff? In the end, he said, I just couldn't follow him anymore. I didn't agree with his ways. When Ouspensky began to have his own group, he told his disciples, don't go to him, he's dangerous, he's no good, he's a charlatan, he's a fake. And then you have to kind of sit back and ask, Ouspensky became Ouspensky because of the riches given to him by Gurdjieff. And in the end, Ouspensky took what Gurdjieff had given him and then kind of stabbed him in the back. That's what Ouspensky did. And because he was such a good researcher that we have in Search of the Miraculous, and it's written in such a nice way, I don't know if Ouspensky got it or not, if things clicked for him. But all I know is that he walked away from Gurdjieff. And maybe it's just a man thing, I don't know. Maybe two men just can't get along after a while. There is this movie, and I'm sure you've seen it, it's called Powder. And so there is this young man who has these miraculous powers. There is the wife of the sheriff who has cancer and is dying, but she's not dying, she's just in agonizing pain. So the sheriff has a son, and apparently something happened between the father and the son that became an obstacle. They haven't talked for like years. They see each other, but they just pass each other by. And Powder goes to the room and looks at the woman, and he has this ability to kind of see her ideas inside because she can't really be vocal at this stage of her life. And she looks at the sheriff and says the only reason why she's still alive is because she wants to make sure that when she leaves there's going to be peace between you and your son. The woman dies. Sheriff is standing outside. All of a sudden his son comes, and they embrace and they cry. There is this moment where both of them, the thing clicks for both of them. They realize that they have acted kind of immaturely. You know, they've kind of been worst enemies for 10 years. It's not that they didn't try to make things work. They did. It just didn't work. It had to be Padre, it had to be this woman at the moment of death. The sheriff had to hear what was living inside this woman while she wasn't willing to die. He had to be in a certain mood. He had to see his son in a certain mood. The son had to be in a certain mood. And all these different things come together in a very magical, harmonious way. It clicks for the son, clicks for the father, they embrace, the story is finished. Remove one of those components, they're never going to come together. And I think that's, in some ways, that's the beauty of things. I mean, it's agonizing, but you know, it keeps charlatans. It keeps deception out of it. No one can give you understanding. No one can claim that they are able to give you understanding. All that anyone can do is to create the environment, even for yourself. I mean, what do? You dim the light, you maybe light a candle, some incense, you take a shower, you grab your book or your laptop, you go into this room in hopes of sitting, contemplating, having some intense emotions and then beginning to write. You sit there and you sit there and you sit there and you sit there and nothing happens and you say, I can't write. And then you're washing dishes and there is some music in the background. All of a sudden you find yourself in a very unique mood. You go into your room, you sit there for a half hour, you sit and you write. It's finished. How did it come about? Don't know. You know, you try to create an external environment so that it could impact the way you feel on the inside so you could write, but it didn't click. And in some ways it's really, really, really good if you kind of understand that a little bit, and that in itself needs some time to kind of be processed inside you. That if no one can give you understanding, if it's something that needs to happen inside you, by you, where do you go to read in hopes of understanding? What workshop, what lectures do you go to listen to in hopes of understanding? You know, I remember one time Krishnamurti had asked me, so, do you have a question? Is there something I can do for you? I said, yeah, I have questions, but you can't answer them. You can't do anything for me. I'd like to just hang out with you, but you can't do anything for me. He says, interesting. And that's how it is. But I do think if you were to place yourself in certain external environments all the time, then your chances of being able to understand something, your chances just become slightly better. There are no guarantees, but it becomes better.